Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Rob, for your kind introduction. With that, I can keep the introduction of myself and my company to a minimum. Just very briefly, what our company, which is basically my wife and myself, have been doing for the past 18 years is largely market knowledge. We provide a lot of market reports for companies that want to enter new markets, for multinationals, for the financial industry. We have put over the past 20 years the global cement industry on Google Earth. Not only plants, grinding plants, but also all the terminals, the coal-fired power plants, blast furnaces for slag and so on. We've got a website which is quite informative in that respect. We've got a database with all these facilities. We've written some publications, amongst them the handbook on global cement trade. But still, that's about 40% of our work. The 60% that we do is mostly consulting on projects, assisting cement plants on the water side, or sometimes not on the water side, how to best export their goods by sometimes changing their internal logistics and finding methods to load bigger vessels or special type of vessels in ways that they did not do before. We do a lot of cement terminals, mostly in the trading, the trading terminals, which require quite a bit of flexibility and can't be purely dedicated to cement. And we are able to assist companies also with, let's say, sourcing, shipping, and so on. In this presentation, I was asked by the organizers to give a sort of general introduction to the trade in the world. And I'll be doing that by providing some general statistics, provide you with the current key developments in the international market of cement and clinker, the economical mechanisms behind trade and distribution, seaborne trade and distribution, which is not just purely the profit that you can make on the trade. Everything in trade and distribution turns about optimizing the utilization factor of cement plants. Then there's, I'll give you some general statistics of the global facilities involved in trade and distribution, developments in, let's say, new coastal clinker plants and also terminals. And there's a big differences in facilities that are oriented towards trade and facilities that are oriented towards distribution of cement. So we'll get all into that. Might be even difficult to squeeze that all within 1 hour, so sometimes I'll just move a little bit quickly through that. But anyhow, it's all in your presentation and on the memory stick, so you can find that back. Here you'll find the key routes in the global cement trade. The countries in blue are the countries which basically have a surplus and are involved in some exports of material. Gray countries have a deficit in either cement and clinker or both, and the light gray areas are more or less in balance. They're not importing or exporting large volumes. This is the 2015 map, which had a total of 110 ton trade, both regional and global, and the waterborne domestic distribution 112 million ton. This is 2015 map. I'm still working on the update to the 2016 one. It always takes a while before all the global figures come in from the various sources. you also have to adapt those, because if you add up globally all the export figures of countries, they are about 25% larger than the official import figures of countries. And as those need to match, you have to more or less make your own adjustments. The United States has got a pretty good system where you can really follow every shipment of cement that comes in. But of course, for Africa, for large parts of Asia, for South America, that's much less clear, and you have to basically know the industry quite well to understand where those exports are all going to. The key export base is East Asia, where you've got the combination of China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. And then also Vietnam. With that, you're talking about almost 55–60% of global exports. Mediterranean is another large base, which in Europe as a whole is becoming more important now in exports, mostly thanks to the growing markets in West Africa and the United States. If you look at the 2016 volume, you see that a lot of it is clinker, bulk cement, and to a minor aspect it's the bagged cement. So international shipments 110 million tons, and domestically 93, and then there's only inland waterways, especially the US big rivers, the Great Lakes, the rivers in Europe, and in big rivers. Some of them in Asia now. You also see that river transportation of cement is taking on about 80.7. This does not include China. I'm still working on that, but that's quite a difficult country to get the exact numbers of and all the facilities. But we're slowly getting there. If you look at vessel type, that especially in respect to, let's say, the facilities that are involved in all this is important. You see that large bulk carriers take the majority of the international trade. They take most of that is in clinker, bulk cement, a fair volume, and then the bagged cement is that domestically still is fairly large, but internationally that volume is going down. The coastal cement or coastal bulk carriers very much used for regional and domestic distribution, about 32 million total. And self-discharging cement carriers, they do most of it. Most of their work is domestic distribution, but still a fair amount of volume also in international trade. Then, if we look at the 2016 figures, although I don't have all the detailed information, the global picture is quite clear. So with an increase with about 7 million tons to 117 million tons in seaborne trade, and then 94 million domestically by sea and 21 million by inland waterways. So clinker trade, mostly to West Africa and also other areas in Africa, that was the largest growth area, and the United States was second. Also some small growth figures in respect to the seaborne domestic distribution, and the handysize and larger bulk carriers take the vast majority of the seaborne transport. And the outlook of trade, seaborne trade, both for domestic distribution and for seaborne trade, is again positive, and it looks quite positive for the coming years. Well, what are the current developments? And actually, what is determining the global trade at this moment is the situation in China. That situation in China is turning. After years and years and years of growth, we now see a slowdown in China, and it will even have to go to a reduction in production in the coming years. The high level was reached in 2014 with almost 2.5 billion ton of cement produced. In 2015 that dropped back with 140 million tons. By comparison, the whole cement consumption in the United States is about 100 million tons, so that fell away. 2016 estimate, it's stabilizing a bit, 40 million tons. But still, that's only because the government has started to support the industry a bit. And an incredible high cement consumption per capita. China, this is the let's say 2011 graph of basically GDP in relation to cement consumption per capita. And you see that the more mature a country becomes in respect to economy, well, when there's, let's say, when the GDP is very low and a country starts to take off economically, you get a fairly rapid rise in cement consumption per capita. But as soon as you get over, let's say, a GDP of $25,000 per capita, then the curve goes down again. This is 2011, and you can see that there were two countries with, which were very, very far outside the curve, Saudi Arabia and China in 2011. And already in 2011 that was considered unsustainable, but China kept on going. So in 2015, you can see the red dot on the top, it was about 1,700 kilograms. And it's clear that has to come down. So current situation in China, 1,600 integrated lines and 2,000 grinding plants. Overall production capacity, 3.5 billion tons. So the utilization factor of the Chinese cement industry never has been really, really high. The estimated cement production in 2016, 2.3 billion ton, cement consumption per capita about 1,650 kilograms. Well, the Institute of Technical Information on Building Materials in China has made a forecast till 2035. And basically that means the cement consumption per capita will go down to 600 kilo. So a reasonably mature economy. Overall cement consumption will be about 1 billion ton. And compare that now with the 2.3 billion tons. And that will mean that there have to be about 600 integrated lines in use in 2035 and 800 grinding plants. And that means that you will have in the coming years in China an average drop in cement consumption of about 70 million ton per year, and an average closure of 100 million tons of production capacity per year. It will mean that China has a constant large surplus capacity, and in such situations exports will always be attractive. And you can see clearly China has, because it lowered its export prices of clinker and cement drastically, almost to levels not seen since the 1998 Asian crisis. You can buy cement and clinker in China for very low prices, and what's more, everybody has dropped with it. Up to the Mediterranean as well, everywhere cement prices have gone down in accordance with it. If you look further in the world, China, large surplus capacity available. Indonesia, 2017 production capacity 120 million ton per year. Consumption about 70. Iran, current production capacity 80 million ton, and that's already with exports of 15 million ton. And their forecast for 2025 is 120 million tons. Turkey, Vietnam, Pakistan keep adding capacity, which is larger than their domestic growth. And we already have structural surpluses in South Europe, Middle East, Thailand, South Korea, Japan, and so on. So we will have, for the foreseeable future, let's say the next decade, we will have a glut of cement and clinker available for seaborne exports, and free on board pricing will remain low. And with that, and with the current situation in shipping, which also is quite bad and which also will take years to recover, it doesn't really make economical sense to build a new integrated cement plant within 200 kilometers from a port. It's importing clinker or cement is a much more cost-effective situation. And you see that in countries like the US. You see that instead of reopening old kiln lines, in building new facilities, the only things that are happening is a bit of modernization of plants, and the actual, let's say the planned new buildings, like a new plant for Titan and so on, a new line for Lafarge, they are cancelled, and sometimes even lines are closed. If you look why clinker is getting more popular than bulk cement, is purely that it's much simpler to handle. In China isn't especially geared towards exports. It's much easier for them to get clinker to general ports, bagged cement to general ports, rather than cement, which requires specialized storage facilities, specialized handling equipment, and so on. Okay, on to the economical mechanisms behind cement. Cement trade is not purely, and cement trade distribution is not purely going around the, let's say, the profit that you can make on exports. The actual goal is to get export plants, or let's say to get plants into maximum utilization. I'll discuss with you a number of economical mechanisms behind this, which actually show that although the trade and distribution might just be, let's say, 220, 230 million ton per year, but actually it affects the production capabilities of cement plants up to a figure between 800 million and 1 billion ton of cement. It affects the production costs, and that's what really matters. This is an example of a cement plant, and what you have is that the production costs of a cement plant per ton are very, very much dependent on its utilization factor. A cement plant, whether you use it at 70% or at 90% of its utilization factor, basically has the same amount of personnel. You have to keep your kiln heated for 24 hours a day. Your maintenance very much is also in relation to the usage hours rather than ton throughput. So the cement plants, very, very much in production cost, are dependent on their utilization factor. So if you're only relying on domestic sales and you have to run at 70% of your production, then what basically when you start exporting is not that you make, let's say, some money on your, let's say, every dollar that you can sell it above pure production cost, but your overall production cost per ton over your full production goes down. And that can run into a far, far, far higher figure than the amount of money that you can make by the trade itself. So that is the reason why exports are being promoted so much, and why companies are prepared to drop their export prices to very, very low levels. Basically, the lower production cost that they get, even for their domestically sold cement, is the key driver behind those exports. Then there's some other mechanisms. It looks like, let's say, company A, which sits inside a market and can sell its cement for its full margin is in the best position, but that only is the case if it can sell its full production here. If the plants which are outside that market but distribute or export to it, they basically, when they can sell the same volume in their home markets, but in addition can move their cement to the other markets, they're able to get a much better margin than that. And distribution actually, so that the cement company that produces the cement is also the owner of the terminal in that market and controls the shipping towards that market. There again are in a better condition than, let's say, you've got an exporting plant, a trading company that imports it and feeds it into the market. But still, it works on all accounts because of this lower ex-works price mechanism. Then there's the vertical integration aspect. Vertical integration means that you can better control your markets, and as such you've got a guaranteed output for your cement plants. And that works as well for the companies that distribute to the market or import into the market. And importers can be the ready-mix industry, either big companies or combinations of companies themselves. This vertical integration means that for the cement plants, they've got a better way to control their output, but it also means that the independent ready-mix part of the industry is forced to basically buy cement from their competitors, and that gives them a high incentive to start realizing their own cement supply and realize those imports. So many new cement terminals in the world are actually realized by independents. And then what you see quite often is that after a number of years they are basically being acquired by the big industry. Here again is that scale, that variation of cement consumption per capita based on the GDP of a country, and with countries moving through that scale, their cement consumption per capita will vary. Cement consumption per capita is not purely a stable figure. And with those movements, there's another factor, that is that cement consumption doesn't exactly relate to economic growth. There's an acceleration factor. When you've got economical growth taking off, so an increase in economical growth, you will get a growth in cement consumption which is a multiple times that. So economical growth from let's say 1 to 3% might generate a 8 or 9% growth in cement consumption. What happens when economical growth becomes flat is that indeed your cement consumption more or less will drop back to that economical growth. When economical growth starts to go down, cement consumption again with that acceleration factor will jump much faster. And that means that cement consumption is a factor which is related to economical growth, but it reacts much faster to it, and it is in that respect a much more unstable figure. And another factor that also gets into that is that whereas economical growth and cement consumption growth might grow incrementally, when you add cement production into a country, you add new kilns, new grinding plants, in which you add, let's say, 1 million ton per year production. So you get situations where countries, also very specifically what you see in a country is that one cement manufacturer starts expanding its plants or building new lines, everybody starts doing it because everybody wants to keep their market share. So you constantly see that countries get into overproduction and shortage situations, and that means that cement trade also has great movement. So, and then indeed when you get the curve that the cement consumption goes down again when the economy matures, then the countries usually are settled with a cement industry which is far too big. And they become substantial exporters. If you add up all these factors and you get all these changing situations in trade, the multinationals, what they are especially looking at when they go into their markets is they want to be price makers. They want to be able to control the pricing. So they're also thriving for the lowest combination of production, transport and financial costs in key markets. And the companies that do less well in that respect, they basically will have to be key followers. One aspect that needs to be said is that the financial costs are a key aspect in that. And especially what we saw during the financial crisis is that indeed the biggest companies got into trouble there, and we've seen that the medium-sized and smaller companies, which were geared to a much lesser ratio, they in effect over that period became the price makers in a lot of regions, and the multinationals had to follow. Another interesting aspect is that one coastal cement production plant can affect, let's say, a lot of inland cement plants in the same group as well. Here you see a situation in a country which has an oversupply situation. So it's got 5 cement plants and let's say 3 coastal distribution facilities. There's an oversupply situation, and what basically happened is that the oversupply of those 5 plants together gets exported by that plant at the sea. And actually the landlocked plants will have their sales area more towards the coastal areas. And now the situation starts changing. Cement consumption in that area starts going up, and there's actually a shortage of cement. And what happens then is that that exporting plant doesn't export anymore. It imports extra clinker to use its extra grinding capability, and it also ships less to its coastal terminals. It actually uses one of the coastal terminals to import bulk cement. And that means that actually the sales areas of those coastal facilities will move much inland, and the inland plants can actually supply to closer by. So overall their distribution costs also become a bit less. But as well as in the oversupply situation, as well as in the shortage situation, all the 5 plants can keep their optimal production capacity. That is also what, and especially for the multinationals, what cement trade does, balancing markets with oversupply with markets with shortages. Okay, we continue to a regional overview. The US is at this moment a very large growth market. Basically at the end of the financial crisis, say 2-3 years ago, imports by sea in the US were marginal. They were less than 3 million tons. And before the crisis, they had been 31 million tons, so quite a drop. But they've been steadily growing in the past years, and they have reached 9.25 million tons in 2016. We'll probably grow another 2 million tons this year, and basically for the next couple of years, the situation in the US looks quite good. And that means that there's a lot of seaborne imports will grow rapidly, and with that there needs to be a lot of more terminal activity there. What has happened during the crisis has been a number of acquisitions. So those mostly have taken place in respect to plant ownership. But the result is that the plant and terminal ownership in the United States are out of balance. And that means that a number of companies, like for example CRH, which got a number of the Lafarge-Holcim cement plants in Canada and North US, they basically do not have an import base there because LafargeHolcim kept all their facilities those facilities quite to itself. So you can see that there's already some attempts to change this. There's some cooperation agreements between companies, but basically, if the cement industry in the United States want to keep equal market share as they have now, there will need to be a number of new terminals built. Large US concrete producers and even smaller ones will look to establish their own import operations, which can be either clinker or cement. And that is happening quite large now. Because of this enormous difference between the domestic sales prices and the prices for which you can import cement and clinker, it becomes attractive for even, at this moment you could even import cement into the US in big bags and it still is profitable. So, and that's possible for even small ready-mix operations. There's a lot more factors attached to that, but it shows the situation. Basically, before the crisis, all the US terminals were built for handy-max vessels. But the shipping industry during the crisis has changed. Basically now, they have enlarged the handy-max size, which is a typical 40,000 tonner. You've got the Supramax class of bulk carriers, which could take 55,000 ton, and they cost the same per day as that handy-max vessel. What's happening in the past few years, and you see now in North America, the first customers for that are the Ultramaxes. It's basically again an enlarged version which can take 60,000, 62,000 ton. But the US terminals have not been built for that. So to make use of this new shipping capacity, and almost no new handy-max vessels are being ordered, it's all Supramaxes and Ultramaxes, they will have to expand. US terminals were built for one type of product only. Also that is changing. Most of new requirements are that they would like to receive both low alkalite and high alkalite type of cements. They want to be able to import fly ash. None of these facilities has actually been designed for that. So a lot of things will happen in the US terminal situation in the coming years to meet all these new circumstances. West Europe also is into growth again, which is quite nice. Healthy growth, especially in West Europe, in construction and cement consumption, and that's a trend that looks to continue. And we see that also leads to new seaborne cement and clinker trade. We see that power plants are being closed. That's leading to shortages of fly ash, and also their solutions will have to be found. We see new self-discharging ships getting into Europe, new build for the first since many, many years. We see new terminals, especially in the UK, and that makes Europe, for equipment suppliers and everything again, quite an interesting market. And also there, who knows what will happen with the industry, but there is a trend towards less clinker production and more towards cementitious materials. There's, especially in respect to seaborne trade, very positive outlook for the coming years. And then another regional market, which especially on this side of the world is interesting, is Africa. Africa is still the only continent where a rapid growth of cement consumption is possible. An enormous growth. The cement consumption in Africa could easily quadruple. So everybody wants to be there. And that means that plants are being built there far faster than cement consumption is actually getting there. Integrated plants are not very suitable for that. They are being built, but the best way to cope with the fact that your plant will have to run for quite a few years on very low utilization factor, It's much better to build grinding plants. And that's what everybody is doing. So you see that the number of grinding plants in West Africa especially, but also on the east side, is growing almost exponentially. And with that, clinker will have to be brought in larger and larger volumes. And the only thing is these grinding plants are all built, let's say, within 5 to 10, sometimes even further away from ports. And that means that they have to use these regular ports to import their clinker. Well, those ports are already congested, are getting more and more congested with the rising economy, and it means there's a lot of delays in ships waiting, difficult situations in unloading situation. And that will mean that creative solutions are needed, let's say ship-to-barge transfer or floating plants to ease this situation. Good, we move on to the next phase. General statistics of the facilities involved in seaborne trade and distribution. So when we look at that situation, we have in total 1,340 facilities involved in seaborne trade and distribution. 233 cement plants, 859 cement terminals, 248 grinding plants. This is, of course, just a moment in time. Every month, new facilities are being added, and we try to keep up to date with that in our database. Looking at this, it's interesting, of course, not just these plants, but what are they involved in? How are they able to distribute their materials by ship? And you can see that there's 233 cement plants involved in this sea waterborne trade, and only 96 plants actually are on the water side, have their own dock or port. Often they do that combination of receiving their coal and secondary raw materials by water, and indeed use their own port facilities to distribute and trade their cement and clinker. There's 10 plants that are a bit further away, sometimes well up to 26 kilometers even, and that have a conveying belt that runs between plant and port. I think one of the most spectacular is Cementos Lima, which has about 20 kilometers of conveying belt in a tunnel from their plant to their own port facility at the coast. 17 plants rail cement to a loading facility in the port, and 3 in addition rail to the port, have no facility there, and move their clinker or cement directly from railcar to ships. Then trucking is the most easy way to get your cement or clinker to the port. 25 plants have a loading facility in the port as intermediate storage, but there's even more plants that just truck their cement or clinker to the port, and basically from truck it's almost directly moved into the ship. Cement by boat trucks that blow pneumatically the cement into the seagoing vessel. And 9 cement plants barge cement to deep water facilities, which can be rivers even, they don't need a dock anymore then, and transfer directly from barge to ships. And 17 cement plants distribute domestically in barges. If we look at the ship sizes of these that these 233 plants can load, most of them have the capability to load handy-size and handy-max bulkers. Still, only a limited number can do the Supramaxes and Ultramax, maybe indeed 85 of those. The other ones are limited to the handy-max or even smaller than handy-size vessels. 63 plants have the capability to load up to coastal bulk carriers or coastal vessels, self-discharging vessels. 5 are involved in Great Lakes trade and distribution, and 17 purely low inland barges. Then we move on to the large number of cement terminals in the world. Here you see that of these terminals, 171 are with the ship unloader. Those are the ones that mostly will be involved in trade. There's only a few distribution terminals that have these ship unloaders. The majority of the terminals worldwide are distribution terminals, and they are served by self-discharging vessels. And the reason for this is that self-discharging vessels can supply cement to multiple terminals. So there's a fleet, let's say, of about a little over 330, 340 of these vessels, which can serve these 670 terminal facilities. Of these terminals, there are, I think it's got a little bit distorted here, but there's, I think, 142 suitable for handy-size and handy-max vessels. And of those, there are 61 served by the largest self-discharging ships, 50 have a mechanical unloader, 26 have a pneumatic unloader, 5 have grab and hopper system. Grab and hopper systems are quite often used in the early years of a cement terminal, and then later they get replaced by ship unloaders. But still, in new cement terminals, you see that the grab and hopper system is still, let's say, much more prevalent than you would see on the overall number. Most of the cement terminals are suitable for smaller vessels, which means that they're used for the coastal trade, regional and domestic distribution. Most of them are served by these self-discharging vessels. 77 have a pneumatic unloader, those are in trading terminals, and mechanical unloaders. And only of the small terminals, one in France has got a grab and hopper system. Most of them are silo terminals. Again, when you have, we'll get into that a little bit later, when you are in domestic or regional distribution, and it's actually the same, the plants that distribute and the terminals are same ownership, then you can look 20 years ahead. You can invest in silos. If you're more into trading terminals, you get to flat storage facilities and domes. And then there's floating terminals, a number that's getting down now, but I do expect that we'll get a new generation of these floating terminals. They are very much used on sort of per project base, and can move to a next destination when the project is finished. And there's basically 8 terminals that involve no storage at all, and where the cement is directly distributed to a number of customers, which then at their ready-mix operations have to have very large cement storage facilities. And then we get to the grinding plants. There you see that most of the coastal grinding plants are suitable for long-distance clinker supply. They receive their clinker by handy-size, handy-max bulkers. And also there, the expectation is that the Supramax and Ultramax are going to take over most of this. That's not, let's say, that you still have quite a lot of handy-size vessels and handy-max vessels involved, is because the African ports are a bit slow to upgrade to get the bigger drafts necessary to get the Supramaxes and the Ultramaxes, but it will come. And only, let's say, a much lower part of the grinding plants receives cement from coastal vessels. There's a few on the Great Lakes, of course, and a number of them that receive their clinker or other material by inland barges. With the clinker plants, less than half have got their own dedicated dock. Most of the plants receive via general ports, and 58 plants actually use ship-to-barge transshipment. Very much the case, for example, in Bangladesh, where cement comes to the mouth of the big rivers in large bulk carriers. There's being transshipped into river ships, and then being moved all even up north to the country where they feed an enormous amount of. In Bangladesh itself, there's almost 48 plants, grinding plants located. But also in Africa, there's a few, and in Europe, South America. There are many different solutions for plants to export, distribute their cement and clinker, and the solutions are basically dependent on the various choices that are being made. You basically have to look at your market, let's say the developments there, the types of cement that are needed in those markets. With your plant, when you look at cement plants that are involved in the trade distribution to many markets, this means that they must be able to produce sometimes 2 types of clinker, 7 types of cement. That then has to be delivered in bulk, 50 kg bags, or let's say paper bags or big bags, and that all has got tremendous impact on the design of the distribution capabilities of cement plants. On the other side, when you decide to move clinker or cement on the receiving facilities, that also has quite a bit of influence. And then the shipping also takes place. So you all have to take that into account, and that involves designs, but it also involves that your facility has to be adapted to future changes, and you have to include that in its basic design. What we see at this moment in seaborne trade is that the vast majority of new facilities are coastal grinding plants, Africa. In the US, the old terminals that have been mothballed and are started up again now, they are basically outdated, and there needs to be quite a lot of work to get those into shape again. Domestic distribution, Southeast Asia, increasing all the time. Indonesia, especially Philippines is starting. You've got the established networks in Japan, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. That all needs to be enlarged. West Europe, after a period of standstill, becoming quite active again. And there also, because maritime rules are changing and the ships have to be much cleaner, here we actually see a new generation of self-discharging ships being built in West Europe. And what we see globally is that the sea trade of cementitious materials is going up and up and up. So that we need to take into account when developing all these new facilities. Clinker versus cement in respect to trade and distribution. The advantage of clinker is that it can be handled by general bulk ports and general equipment. The availability worldwide is very, very large, because every cement plant which is not too far from a port can do it. Quite often the materials to intergrind with the clinker are available in the export places locally. Cement plants and clinker grinding plants do not have to be inside a port, they can be located outside it. And there's very large ship sizes possible, as clinker has a much longer shelf life as cement. So you get lower shipping and handling costs, and especially when you're an importer, a much larger availability worldwide. The big disadvantage, of course, was that you have to realize a grinding plant, and that used to be a long-term project with quite a high capital cost. Cement, much more difficult to move, requires dedicated facilities and equipment. There's a large amount of bulk cement available for export around, but it's more limited than clinker. And especially with all the political aspects in the cement industry, that is a factor to take into account. Whereas, let's say, you only have to transport 90% of clinker to get 100% cement, with cement trade you need the full volume to be shipped. Facilities need to be inside or very close to a port, which means very expensive areas to work in, to pay lease for. Ship size limited by the capabilities of the plant and the receiving terminal, and there's the higher shipping and handling costs in general that cement brings with it. So clinker sounds much more advantageous and indeed is taking off more, but it's got this limitation of these costly, sometimes very costly grinding plants that you need at the end. But there, a number of developments have taken place, and there's this development of the mini plants. Seaborne in Spain has started that. Small modular containerized plants with a low capital cost and a very short realization time. But it has been taken over by the whole industry. You now see that everybody has moved to build grinding plants modular in a whole range of sizes. But even large grinding plants now are built prefabricated and shipped, and in the end, what you do is adding all those modules on top of each other, and your grinding plant, instead of taking a year to assemble and build, now can be built in let's say 6 weeks to 2 months, 2.5 months. And that has brought down the cost and delivery time, the realization time of these clinker grinding plants, and that is boosting clinker trade as a result. So here you see one of these Seaborne mini plants, in which the original one, the classic, can do about 100,000 tons a year, and the new XL model goes up to about 250,000 tons a year. You can put several of them side by side. That's already happening. This is taking off rapidly and is opening new markets for clinker trade. And then our company has done a project in combination with KHD and that is they basically have grinding facilities based on roller mills. Roller mills do not need a perfect horizontal base, and that makes them suitable to install on let's say barges or ships. So we've developed this, instead of a floating terminal, a floating grinding plant, which can receive its clinker in the, you sacrifice one hold, but on the other hand, because clinker is so heavy, you still can load the ship fully in the other holds. And basically you can convert a Handymax, Supramax or Ultramax vessel into a facility that can receive its raw materials by barge. It doesn't even need dock. You can put it in a river mouth, you can put it in an area of a port that's not used, and basically that means that the realization costs, because you don't pay land lease, are very effective. So we'll see what this concept will work out in the coming years. Then we go to cement. I'll go through the next slides a bit quick to get the presentation within the time frame. So in the logistical, in the next 3-4 slides, I've mentioned a number of the logistical factors that play a role in the distribution of cement. And that basically comes down the difference between regular cargo ships and self-discharging ships, and the fact that you need buffer storage both at the loading and discharge points. And there's all kinds of costs associated with that: capital cost, operating cost. The fact that if you use one type of material, multiple types of material, there's a number of factors involved in that. Then, as I mentioned, you've got the choice between, for cement, self-discharging cement carriers with onboard loading and discharge systems, and general bulk carrier systems. And what it very much will come down to in the end is that you'll see that the self-discharging cement carrier is a typical instrument for distribution, whether domestic or regional, and the general bulk carrier is the vessel that you used for trade with all its fluctuating factors. You have to make choices between indeed silos, domes, flat storage, floating terminals. You've got different port solutions, you've got many different configurations, but the choice of shipping in that respect is your key or your key factor in all these things. And then secure, stable, high throughput, long-term routes, those favor solutions with low operating costs and higher capital costs and less flexibility. But the less secure, the fluctuating throughput, trade, mostly trade routes, favor solutions with the lowest possible capital cost and the most flexibility to change. And there's a whole range of solutions that will have to be considered. And flexibility, and that's what is really the specialism of the projects that we get involved in. The capability that into the designs of all these facilities you integrate already a flexibility for future changes. Steps in terminal design. The key thing is to determine the ship type and the ship size based on the overall logistics of the transport chain. So the shipping, it really requires knowledge of that, what the developments will be, what let's say the coming 10 years will bring, to make a choice in respect to the ship type and ship size. And that determines, as I say, the buffer capacity that you need on both ends of the supply chain. So based on that ship side and annual throughput, you have to determine the buffer capacity that a terminal needs, so the capacity above the ship size. Then there are all kinds of intermediate storages in facilities, truck loading for bagging, and there's a number of internal conveying systems, and the capacity of those systems are very much dependent on the market characteristics behind it, which are the annual throughput, seasonal influences, your bulk bag ratio, and dispatch characteristics. Also very much indeed the let's say blending now also for terminals is becoming an interesting additional issue. Always you have to look at the available port or coastal sites with their possibilities and limitations. And then you have to select your type of storage and your type of internal conveying and handling equipment based on the required return on investment period and your operating cost. And most important, history has shown, is that you already from the beginning have to add the flexibility to the design, so that the terminal or the plant can meet the fluctual, or let's say can meet the fluctual changes that are there. There's quite a difference between facilities for trade and facilities for distribution. Trade, the initiative is mostly on the receiving side, so it's a sort of pulling system. Distribution is basically a cement plant moving cement or clinker towards its own facilities. It's therefore, distribution is far more domestic and regional oriented. One cement plant distributing to multiple receiving terminals, same ownership, and it's based on basically that distribution network is there to optimize the output of the cement plant. Steady throughputs, long-term outlook, and there we see that mostly self-discharging ships that have the capability to move product to multiple facilities are used. Trade, much different animal. International, very much international based, quite often long distance. one receiving terminal that needs to have the capability to receive cement from multiple cement plants, and sometimes keep shipments, or quite often keep shipments from various different sources separated. Different ownerships usually, based on a shortage situation in one country, surplus in another, which is an always moving thing. Highly fluctuating annual throughputs and uncertain long-term prospects. There you see that mostly general bulk carriers are used. If you look at the differences between trading terminals and distribution terminals, basically on the left side in the column you see that the required storage size of a terminal is the cargo size. The buffer for shipping deviations, a ship never arrives exactly at the day you would like to have it at the terminal. It will arrive within an agreed range around that. You have to order cement a long time ahead, especially if you get it long distance, where the voyage can already take 2, 3, 4 weeks. You might have to order the cement 8 to 10 weeks in advance. In those 8 to 10 weeks, your sales can deviate. That also needs to be incorporated in your buffer storage capacity of your terminal. And then there's a general buffer, and that's dependent on whether, for example, you are an independent ready-mix supplier who is solely dependent on that terminal to get your ready-mix plants supplied with cement, or you are a multinational and apart from your import terminal you also have several cement plants in the area, so that you can move shipments of cement around a bit. That determines your general buffer. And then of course the quantity that you can move directly from ship to truck, so basically the output of the terminal during the ship unloading, you don't need to store that cement, so that you can deduct from that overall volume. And if you compare those, let's say, the cargo size plus the buffers minus the output of the terminal during the unloading, if you look at that for trade terminals and distribution terminals, you see that trading terminals, usually larger shipping distances, larger ships. Distribution terminals, smaller ships because of the shorter shipping distances. Ships from the general market, longer voyages, larger possible deviations in the trade. Dedicated ships, short voyages, scheduled shipments with relatively small deviations on the distribution side. Basically, long ordering times on the trade side, less stable sales, large possible deviations, small possible deviations because of the short ordering times and stable sales on the distribution side. So if you add all this all up, you see that trade terminals need to have storage capabilities which are very large to very large, and that means that you've got a very low storage capacity to throughput ratio. Basically, you have less money to invest in storage capacity. Distribution terminals, you relatively require small terminals. You've got a high storage capacity to throughput ratio. That means you can invest more money into your facility, and that means that, let's say, for example, you will go to silos, and for the trade terminals you would prefer flat storage or domes. Silos, if you look at the various storage facilities, silos with a high capital cost but a low operating cost, but they also have a very low flexibility. You can't really use them for other products. Domes, medium capital cost, and especially if you can avoid foundations, and that for cement that means going to fluidized floors, floating floors, then you can keep the capital costs quite reasonable. Medium operating cost, silo you can have pure gravity discharge. With a dome you always will have to move the cement up again to truck loading facilities. A dome will also give you a little bit more flexibility. If really things come to things, it would be possible to use a dome for some other products. Flat storage, low capital cost, but of course a higher operating cost because you need to reclaim your cement with front-end loaders, so it's a very manual operation. But because of the low capital cost, you've got a very quick return on investment, and also very flexible. Flat storage you can really use for a wide range of operations, not necessarily connected to the to cement. And then there's the floating terminal, which combines both a high capital cost and a high operating cost, but has the great advantage that you can move it to where the market is. And as such, it always will have a place. So, for distribution terminals, we got the design requirements. They're based on steady throughput, 20+ year outlook, use of self-discharging ships, regular shipping, and resulting in smaller buffer storage, short shipping distances, so overall small ships, small storage facilities. And that means that distribution terminals throughout the world are fairly similar. Silos, usually with drive-through systems for trucks, and bagging plants in the countries where the bag market is large, small to large bagging plants attached to. Trade terminals have to be designed for a highly fluctuating annual throughput, maximum 5 to 10 year outlook, use of bulk carriers, so you need a ship unloader, irregular shipping, so you need large buffer storage, and because the shipping distances and large ships are there, you need the very large storage facilities, and you also will need flexibility. To give you an example of the flexibility, or let's say of the fluctuations that terminals have to go through, this is the United States, 1990 to 2015, and there you see the import situation and how much it fluctuates. And actually, when you pull this graph even further back to the 1970s, when it really started, you see that the United States almost on average every 10 years will have a tremendous dip in which seaborne imports almost go to nothing. And then, because also, let's say, the United States keeps a steady amount of imports at the bottom, but those are imports via the Great Lakes, by rail from Canada, and by rail from Canada and Mexico. So seaborne really moves from almost nothing to its peak in 2006, which was for seaborne was about 31 million. And terminals have to be built to meet those variations. Trading terminals have to meet that. If you also look at terminals in the US, and the ones with a ship unloading system have been used for the ones with the ship unloading system are used for really that long-term trade. The terminals receiving self-discharging vessels in the States are now almost all used for domestic distribution. In the past, they were used also for, let's say, some supply from Colombia and other countries, Venezuela. That has dried up. So from South America, there's no more cement coming to the US. All the cement comes from either Asia or Europe, long distance, big ships. So only the terminals with a ship unloader can handle those. If you look at that, 1975 is when the first terminal with a ship unloader was built. Up to the 1990s, even a little way, but about 16 of them were built. We got the downturn in 99, 94. Only 2 terminals were completed. And then, between 1995 and 2006, most of the current import facilities in the US were built. And then again, 2 of them were late and were already completed as the terminals were, let's say terminals were completed when the crisis was already happening, and the imports got back to almost zero. But what it means is that 22 terminals were built later than 2000, and as such have seen more years of idle operation than years of good annual throughput. And even terminals of 30 years old have seen at least 10 years of zero seaborne imports. That is what cement terminals involved in trade will have to be able to go through. And that means that you have to have short return on investment periods, and you have to have the flexibility to move to other facilities. So these are basically the rules for trading terminals that actually for our company is most of what we do, is terminals that require flexibility, that the terminals are part of a general bulk terminal or a general cargo terminal. The dock should be able to handle multiple materials, and that means that cement unloading and conveying systems should not block the dock. And that's why at this moment you see, well, most new terminals are built on this principle that big mechanical unloaders with the conveying belts behind them are getting much less popular. It's the pneumatic equipment with underground pipelines and dock mobile equipment that you can remove entirely from the dock. They are at this moment more, let's say, the thing to go. If you look at the future, terminals should be expandable to handle bigger ships and multiple types of cement and cementitious materials. You see now the move where let's say, before the crisis, the big terminal was about 70,000 tons of storage. At this moment, the biggest single terminal is 170,000 tons. You can receive multiple cement types and fly ash. That is the way that facilities need to be ready or suitable for. Short return on investment, large and simple storage facilities, optimal use of existing infrastructure, and simple dock mobile or ship unloading systems and the conveying systems behind them. And short realization periods. In some countries, if you have to go to a 5-year environmental permitting phase, forget that for a trading terminal. You must be able to use existing facilities with grandfathered permits. That's where you will be able to realize your facility quickly. Ship unloaders nowadays, more than a year delivery time. Start with grab and hopper if, let's say, the grandfather permits of those bulk facilities allow that. Some of the projects that our company has been involved in, this was one in Galveston. Already it was built as a trading terminal, so it was built with the requirement that it could handle multiple products. Grab and hopper discharge. The dock can handle Supramax vessels. There's a whole bulk terminal behind it for other products. The flat storage facility before the crisis did cement. When the crisis occurred, within a year it had changed over to fertilizer, and it has the capability to be moved back to cement now. Very flexible facility. This is the biggest cement terminal in the world. Riverside Construction Materials, Sylvie, biggest single user terminal. 2 domes of 70,000 tons, so they can handle 2 different types of cement, and use Supramax vessels, cargoes of 50,000 tons, 50,000 ton plus. And they've got a smaller dome of 30,000 ton that they use for fly ash and handy size vessels. Apart from that, the facility, simple floating dock. Domes have been built with floating floors, so a relatively low capital investment. Both combination of pneumatic unloader, but also still the original grab and hoppers, which are now used for gypsum and salt, which during the crisis years were the bulk commodity that goes through the. And over the years, this terminal, crisis or no crisis, has kept expanding, and he now has got this big storage facility, 4 truck loading stations. 2 of the 4 truck loading stations can handle multiple materials. So on the scale, you can load a truck either with cement or with fly ash. 24/7 operation, but let's say only in daytime there's operating personnel, not even operating maintenance personnel. The terminal largely operates itself. Another terminal, Sacramento, 60,000 tons of storage. Large internal buffer, about 3,000 ton with automatic reclaim. And that means that you don't have big overhead truck loading facilities, which in an earthquake area is a requirement. Flat storage can be separated into multi-compartments, so that it also can be used to handle cementitious material. It all has been laid out for that in the beginning. Use of general docks, and actually the dock mobile ship unloaders can be used at 2 different docks. The pipelines are there to run for, and because it's pipelines, you are able to have this multiple dock orientation. And then this was a temporary project in Panama, floating terminal, not even berthed to a dock or whatever, just positioned with spud poles about 100 meters offshore, with a floating pipeline to supply truck loading silos on the shore. It was built for a large construction project, a concrete dam, which required 1 million cubic meters of concrete. Lots of fly ash involved in there. So basically, after 1.5 years of operation, everything was dismantled again and moved to, it actually was acquired then by Arcos and moved to Haiti. This type of floating terminal, which doesn't need a dock, which has the floating pipelines, can operate in many different configurations, requiring minimal port arrangements. That probably is the type of floating terminal which the new generation will get there in the coming years. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please contact my wife or myself in that respect, and we'll be pleased to. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ad. Can I just put you on the spot here? Are there any particular questions for Ad or Marcia just at the moment? I have one very quick question, and that is, has the expansion of the Panama Canal and the possible building of a new canal made any difference to cement distribution worldwide?
Yeah, for not yet. It will. The impact that the Panama Canal has is that it has resulted, especially in the United States, especially on the east coast of the US, that all ports have increased their capabilities they want to receive bigger ships. So that they can now receive bigger ships directly from Asia, which can go through the new Panama Canal locks. That, let's say, dredging out deeper access channels, also making existing docks, giving them a bigger draft, that makes it possible for, let's say, the cement terminals to receive the Supramaxes and Ultramax bulk carriers. And I can even see that the older generation of Panamax, the ship that just fit through the old Panama locks, that even those will be used. So all those port upgrades which are being done to receive the ships which can go through the bigger locks in the Panama Canal also have the result that the cement industry can use that for larger vessels. So slowly that will result also in even larger terminal facilities.
And do you think the new canal will actually be built?
Well, you mean the new canal through, what is it, Nicaragua or like that?
Yeah.
I'm unsure of that. I think the existing Panama Canal has sufficient capability to handle that. For China, strategically, it might be of interest to have its own throughlet, but by legal treaty, the existing Panama Canal is obliged to take any ship through it without political considerations. And it has enough capacity, so I don't see the economic case for a second channel.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, in which case we'll let you go, but once again, thank you very much indeed.